All right, hi everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on CPWR's new Construction Noise and Hearing Loss Prevention Training Program. My name is Jessica Bunting, and I'm the CPWR host and tech support for today's event. So before we get started, I'd just like to go over a few quick things. First, if you're having any technical difficulties whatsoever, please send me an email address at the address on your screen, or if you can't connect to the web portion, you will be able to find my email address just by responding to any of the WebEx emails that you've received, including the reminder email that went out about an hour ago. If you're having trouble hearing through your computer speakers at any point, we recommend that you call in using your phone instead, and that call-in information can be found on the Event Info tab at the top left of your screen, or again in any of the WebEx emails you received. We will take some time at the end of today's presentation to answer questions. So you can enter those questions into the Q&A box at any time during the presentation. We'll do our best to answer all of them at the end. But do please make sure that you are not addressing your questions privately to the presenters. You can address them privately to myself, the host, or publicly to everyone, but I want to make sure that I don't miss any. And finally, today's webinar will be recorded, and the link to that recording will be emailed to everyone along with a PDF of the slides and related resources following the event. Our presenters today are Gary Gustafson, Director of CPWR's Environmental Hazard Training Program, and Eileen Betit, Director of CPWR's Research to Practice Program. And Gary, I will go ahead and let you take it from here.
Great. Jess, can you hear me?
I can.
Great. Well, thank you, and good afternoon for everybody who's joined us today. Today, Eileen and I are going to introduce a new program to address a serious health issue facing construction workers, and that is noise and hearing loss. We're going to start with a brief background on how the new Noise and Hearing Loss Prevention Training Program came about. Then we're going to introduce the types of information covered and the materials available. And then, as Jess mentioned, we'll open it up for questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eileen to get us started.
Thanks, Gary. You know, as Gary just mentioned, hearing loss is a really serious issue for construction workers. And so between 2015 and 2017, we surveyed more than 200 union trainers and 4,000 trainees on their awareness of noise hazards, their use of controls and hearing protection, barriers to use of controls, and possible gaps in the type of training that is being conducted and received. So the following are some highlights of what we learned that informed the new program we developed. First, to find out how frequently workers are exposed to potentially hazardous noise levels on the job, we asked them how often they have to shout to be heard. And as this slide shows, 69% said they have to shout sometimes or more, with 1 out of 4 having to shout often or all of the time. When workers were asked how often they wore hearing protection when working around noise, more than half said they never wear hearing protection or only wear it some of the time. So to understand how to increase workers' awareness of the hazards and the use of hearing protection, trainers and workers were then asked about the noise training that they provide and that they receive. And this slide shows the topics that trainers and workers indicated could be given more attention in training programs. And the topics included how to recognize a noise hazard, the use of hearing protection with a focus on determining when the hearing protection is needed, how to select the right hearing protection, understanding the limitations of the hearing protection they're using, and knowing when hearing protection should be replaced. Other topics that they mentioned that they needed more information on included the risks and signs of hearing loss and engineering and administrative controls for hearing loss, for noise. So in addition, trainers were asked what they feel are the biggest challenges to reducing the risk of hearing loss and training workers about hearing loss and prevention. And taken together, we found that there were 3 challenges that were at the top of the list. One was convincing workers of the hazard. Since hearing loss happens over time, we heard from both workers, particularly older workers, and from the trainers that it's hard to convince the young workers that they're at risk. The second was raising awareness of noise sources and when it's hazardous, and then getting workers to continue to apply what they learned months after the training takes place. So the trainers offered several specific actions that they felt would be helpful for us to take, and one was creating noise-related training materials that they could use in OSHA training programs or as standalone classes. They also saw a need for sending regular notices or reminders that emphasized that workers need regular reminders of what they learned about noise hazards and how to prevent hearing loss. A repeated message was that once is not enough to provide training on noise and hearing loss prevention. And then they recommended that organizations that reach workers, such as unions, CPWR, trade associations, reinforce what people learn in the training programs through their different communication mechanisms like magazines, newsletters, Facebook posts, and Twitter feeds. So based on what we learned from the surveys and follow-up discussions with trainers, we set out to develop a program that would provide ready access to a variety of materials that could be used in training classes and as refreshers. And the resulting program includes, that Gary and I are going to talk about today, includes a 1-hour module and a 30-hour module that can be used on their own as independent classes or as part of an OSHA 30 or an OSHA 10 course. And then a series of these 10 to 15-minute exercises that can be incorporated into other types of classroom training, either safety programs or skills training program, and also a series of exercises that can be used with hands-on training. So our overall goal was to create a program that would provide workers with the necessary training to identify noise hazards, understand the risk for hearing loss, and know what steps they should take to work safely and prevent hearing loss. So with that, I'll turn the floor over to Gary.
Thanks, Eileen, and if you don't mind, you can turn the slides when I say so. Well, thanks, Eileen. So the 1-hour and the 30-minute modules cover the same topics, but there's more detail and interactive activities in the hour-long program. The topics that are included in the programs are why noise and hearing loss is an important issue for construction workers, the signs and effects of hearing loss and tinnitus, hazardous noise, types of noise and common noise sources, how to measure noise using common indicators and some exciting free mobile apps or applications, ways to control noise exposure, and types of hearing protection devices used in construction and their use. Now, there isn't time today to go through each of these elements of the training programs, but we wanted to give you a brief overview of some of the items and the different types of exercises. Next slide, please. So as Eileen's already mentioned, hearing loss is a big problem in the construction industry. In fact, it is one of the most common work-related illnesses in the U.S. And while the numbers vary, according to NIOSH, as many as half of construction workers have some job-related hearing problem. Next slide, please. So why do we care about hearing loss? Many construction workers lose their hearing at a young age. It's not just a problem for older workers. In fact, construction workers experience hearing loss at a younger age than the general population. According to NIOSH, the average 25-year-old construction worker has the hearing of a 50-year-old person. Too often we as construction workers think that too much noise is just part of the job and nothing can be done about it. And as we know, this is not the case, and that's why it's important to know when noise levels are dangerous and what can be done to control the noise level and to protect our hearing. This training module includes additional slides that go into into how workers hear and how loud noises impact their ability to hear. Trainees get to see the anatomy of the ear and receive a brief explanation of how sensitive the human ear is to sound. Trainees are introduced to the term tinnitus and learn that it can be caused by noise-induced hearing loss and some health conditions, including ear and sinus infections, brain tumors, and certain medications and drugs. They also learned that nothing can be done to fix your hearing once it's permanently damaged. But the good news is that noise-induced hearing loss is preventable. Next slide, please. So one of the things we want to make sure that we express to the trainees is that the training program tries to connect with the participant to show them that unlike other construction industries, hearing loss isn't always the result of one event. These are all symptoms. This slide shows all the symptoms of hearing loss, because hearing loss occurs gradually over time. So you won't notice small changes or loss in hearing immediately. Next slide, please. When you work in construction, you're exposed to noise created by the work you're doing and noise created by others on the job site. Being able to hear what's going around you has a direct impact on your safety in your life. We've created a learning activity that will help participants experience what it's like not to be able to hear. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a brief activity that we've incorporated in the training just to show you some of the engaging exercises we've added into the training program. So I've modified this exercise to fit within the time constraints of our webinar. The exercise normally includes 10 words, but today we're only going to use 3. In this, the file includes 3 words that are repeated in 2 audio files. The last audio file has a different set of words. The 5 words that we picked to include are picked to include a wide variety of speech sounds, but with particular emphasis on sounds that can be significantly affected by hearing loss. So, for instance, in the 5 files that we've picked, the first file simulates what it would be like to have severe hearing loss on a construction site. The second sound file that would be played simulates what it would be like to have mild hearing loss on a construction site. The third simulates what it's like to hear words with normal hearing on a construction site. The fourth file simulates what it's like to hear words with at normal hearing in a quiet room. And then for comparison, the 5th file simulates what it would be like to have moderate hearing loss in a quiet room, but with a female speaker. So next slide, please. So if you all would just engage with me here for a second. So if you've got a piece of paper at your desk or where you are, make a grid like this you see on the screen here. Take a minute to create this. We're going to go through a couple of hearing exercises. There should be a column for each exercise on your worksheet. For each of these, I'm going to play an audio file. Each of these audio files will have 5 words in it. As you listen to this audio file, try to write down each word that you can hear in the correct column on your worksheet. Feel free to make a guess if you can't hear the word. At the end of this exercise, I'll show you how well you did. So, Eileen, if you would, click to the next slide, and so let's start, hold on one second, let's start with the audio file. You're going to fill in the column. This audio file has an example of severe hearing loss with a man saying 5 words over top of the background of a noisy construction site. So, Eileen, if you could play the file. Nope.
Sorry about that, Gary.
That's okay.
Let me.
So. Yeah.
And I just want to let you know there was nothing wrong with your audio when you were listening to that. So as you can see, it may be quite challenging to hear, to make out the words that were played in this audio file. So I'm going to skip, for the essence of time, I'm going to skip exercise 2 and 3 and move right to number 4. So if you would, Eileen, go to number 4 and now try to hear the words played in this exercise.
Star. Hue. Bathe. Cap. west.
So this audio was an example of no hearing loss with a man saying 5 words with no background noise. Obviously, compared to the previous example, it was easier to make out the words. Next slide, please. So now in the final audio, you're going to hear a moderate hearing loss with a woman saying 5 words with no, go back, Eileen, you went too far, please. With no background noise. So please play this exercise.
Desk. Desk. Nest. Van. Cat.
All right, Eileen, please advance the slide. Here are the words that were in each audio file. So as you can see that, and check your results to see how well you did. Experts tell us that in the first stages of hearing loss, it becomes difficult to hear high frequencies. For example, you may have difficulty hearing or understanding the high-pitched voices of children. People with hearing loss also often have difficulty differentiating words that sound alike, especially words that contain the letter S, F, or the sound sh, H, or T, K, or soft C sounds. The words on the audio files you heard today contain letter combinations that are usually affected by work-induced hearing loss. Next slide, Eileen. Being exposed to loud noises can result in temporary hearing loss lasting 16 to 48 hours. While the effect may seem temporary, there may be lasting damage to your hearing and have other effects that you may not always think about. Hearing loss can interfere with communication on job sites, making it difficult to hear warning signs. It can impact a person's sense of balance, leading to increased risk of falling. Hearing loss can also have a huge effect on social interactions, leading to the feelings of loneliness and depression. Recent research has also shown that hearing loss may play an important role in brain health as an individual ages, from mild impairments to dementia. Exposure to excessive noise can also increase stress and blood pressure and can lead to nervousness, sleeplessness, and fatigue. Next slide, please. The most common cause of hearing loss is exposure to loud noises. This is called noise-induced hearing loss. Other causes include ear-damaging drugs, medications, and chemicals, such as some solvents used in construction. These are called autotoxic drugs and chemicals. Aging, approximately 1 in 3 people between the ages of 65 and 74 have hearing loss. Hereditary, a head injury, childhood illnesses such as an ear infection, and headphone use. Listening to loud music or noises using earbuds, particularly earbuds, have been shown to cause some damage to cochlea, which may become permanent. Next slide, please. Noise-induced hearing loss continues to be one of the most common work-related illnesses in the United States. It can be caused by a one-time exposure to a loud sound, like an explosion, or by repeated exposure to loud sounds over the recommended limit of 85 decibels for an extended period of time. The amount of damage done by noise depends mainly on how loud the noise is and how long you've been exposed to it. The louder the sound, the shorter the amount of time it takes for damage-induced hearing loss to happen. Next slide. This slide lists a few easy ways to know if it's too loud. If you have to shout to be heard when you're an arm's length, about 2 or 3 feet away from the person you're talking to, or if you need to turn off the equipment you're using to be heard, or you need to move to another location to talk to be heard, or you have to turn the sound on your car radio up after the shift. In this training, we want the information to be transformative, so we included activities workers can do away from the job to see if they've been impacted by noise on the job. For example, in this activity, we asked students for their take-home assignment, the next time they drive to work, We tell them to turn the radio onto the lowest level where they can hear it without having to strain to listen. We ask them, don't change the setting before you get out of the car. Then, after work, see if they need to turn up the sound. If they need to, that's a sign that they've been exposed to hazardous noise levels during the day. Next slide, please. The training introduces participants to how sound is actually measured and how these measurements relate to OSHA permissible exposure limits and NIOSH recommendations. We stress to the participants the relationship between the loudness of the noise, the last two columns on the bottom right-hand slide, and the time it takes to have been exposed above the NIOSH REL and the OSHA PEL, which is the left-hand column. The training also explains how the decibel scale is a logarithmic scale, meaning that a small increase in dBA numbers represents a huge change. Next slide, please. While it will vary by trade and type of work, we want the participants to understand what percentage of the time they are exposed to dangerous noise levels on the job. The answer is that overall, construction workers are exposed to noise levels over the NIOSH REL, or the recommended limit, 73% of the time. Next slide, please. This slide shows noise levels for common tools compared to the NIOSH REL, normal conversation, and a whisper. As you can see, even a hand drill, which can be found on most job sites, produces dangerous noise levels that can damage hearing. Next slide, please. In addition to the noise generated by individual tools, noise is also generated by tasks that they are doing, that others in their trade are doing, and other trades that are on the job site and what they're doing. Some of this noise you or your employer may be able to control, but some you won't be able to. To protect your hearing, we need to think about all of the noise being generated around you. Next slide. While the simple signs mentioned in the previous slide and the noise levels assigned to specific pieces of equipment may alert you to hazardous noise, the only way to accurately know how much noise you're being exposed to is by monitoring the noise while it's happening. There are different ways to measure noise. Two commonly used methods to monitor noise levels at the workplace are personal or worker sampling using a noise dosimeter and area sampling using a sound level meter. The newest method to measure exposure is to directly measure the individual's protected exposure with an in-the-ear dosimeter. Integrated into earplugs or earmuffs, an in-ear dosimeter device measures and records the actual amount of noise the worker is exposed to, with and without hearing protection over their entire work shift. There are also free sound level meter apps you can put on a smartphone. While not as accurate as the equipment we just discussed, these mobile apps are readily accessible and they keep improving. Next slide, please. So far, we've discussed the risks, sources of, and how to measure noise. Now we're going to shift to ways to control construction noise. This slide shows the hierarchy of controls specific to noise. We also provide examples of how to use engineering and administrative controls to control construction noise exposure. Next slide, please. Although it is your hearing that's at risk, it's your employer's responsibility to take steps to protect you from exposure to dangerous noise levels. Here are some steps that an employer can take to reduce their workers' exposure to dangerous noise. Planning, inspection, monitoring, providing different types of hearing protection, and conducting training. Next slide, please. Employers can also buy quieter equipment. NIOSH's Buy Quiet program was established to encourage companies to purchase or rent quieter equipment to reduce worker noise exposure, provide information on equipment noise levels so companies can make informed decisions when replacing or renting equipment, and move manufacturers to design quieter equipment by creating a demand for quieter products. Next slide, please. While there are many things your employer can do to prevent or reduce noise exposure, when exposed to noise above NIOSH's REL of 85 decibels, you will need to wear hearing protection. Next slide. The training module includes information about hearing protection devices, such as the types of hearing protection, next click, factors to consider when selecting the proper hearing protection, next slide, the advantages and disadvantages of the different types of hearing protection, and next, the care and maintenance considerations. OSHA requires employers to make sure hearing protection is provided and properly maintained. The most important factor when selecting hearing protection is the noise reduction that's needed. Next slide, please. Now that participants have a better understanding of the various hearing protection options available, how do they select the right hearing protection for the noise they're being exposed to? In the training, they learn how hearing protection is assigned a noise reduction rating, or an NRR, and how this rating affects the amount of noise they are exposed to. Participants also learn how to calculate the effective NRR, since their hearing protection won't be worn in a laboratory environment. This slide provides an opportunity to practice with a trainer the math used to calculate their level of protection. Next slide, please. But as the examples on this slide show, even if it's the right NRR, if the hearing protection is not used properly, if it does not fit, then it will not work. CPWR recommends that training be done in a way that enables a trainer to demonstrate the proper way to fit an earplug and then distribute hearing protection for the class to practice with. If this is not possible, there is a video embedded into the PowerPoint that can be used to demonstrate how to properly insert hearing protection. Next slide, please. When there is an opportunity for a trainer to lead a hands-on demonstration, the PowerPoint includes instruction on how to conduct a hands-on exercise. The trainer is provided instructor notes in their instructor guide that gives them all the materials and steps needed to complete this exercise. I think you all would agree that workers learn by doing. The training module concludes with a video of workers who have been affected by hearing loss. These are powerful testimonials by construction workers who now are experiencing the effects of hearing loss of being a construction worker. Now, I'd like to turn the presentation back over to Eileen.
Thanks, Gary. So in addition to the topics and the materials that Gary just went through that are in the longer module, we also created these short refresher exercises that reinforce the messages and the lessons that they learned in a more comprehensive training program. And we have an instructor's guide that describes how each of the exercises can be used, and whether they're in a classroom setting or as part of, a hands-on training when people are actually learning their craft. So first, there's a group of exercises that can be inserted into a safety and health training module, and for example, a class on PPE or use of power tools. And there are 3 exercises that cover the impact of hearing loss, and they're from different angles. One is a video of construction workers who have suffered hearing loss, the one that Gary just mentioned, so that would be one exercise. Another is the full-length version of the listening activity that Gary demonstrated. And the third one uses audio files to demonstrate the impact of hearing loss over the course of a person's career in the construction trades. And then there's an exercise on how to properly use earplugs, and it includes a demonstration and a test to see if they've been inserted properly. There's an exercise, how loud is too loud, that reviews some common types of construction equipment, their noise levels, the different types of hearing protection that would be appropriate for those noise levels, and how to decide which one is right for the noise level the worker is going to be exposed to. And then the fourth exercise allows workers to self-assess their hearing, and then they can compare their self-assessment to others in the industry with the same number of years in construction, and this is where our survey results came in handy. So the next set of refresher exercises, these are short topics that can be incorporated into the class portion of the skills training program. So these slides that we've put together that can be inserted, they can be used on their own, or someone can just use one of the slides as a standalone item to reinforce one single message about noise. They cover the risk and cost of hearing loss, how to know if it's too loud, and ways to prevent hearing loss. We also have, so then we also, finally, there are activities that you can use in hands-on skills training. So when you're out on the shop floor, when you're out on a construction site, and these are intended to raise awareness of potential noise hazards using the free NIOSH sound level meter app that Gary showed you, or one of the Android options that we've referenced in the training program. And the exercises include using the sound level meter app to identify noise levels of different equipment that might be used in the training program that day, or to assign different of the different trainees to at different points throughout the day just to measure what the noise level is in the surrounding area. And the idea is just to raise awareness of how they're being exposed to loud noises over the course of the day. And there's also an exercise to remind workers when to use hearing protection and how to select the right one. So we have a number of handouts that we've developed that go with the program, and in each of the instructor guides, whether it's for the 30-minute program or the 60-minute program, these small exercises, each individual instructor guide includes the handouts that would be required. So there's a handout for the Are You Talking to Me exercise, a handout about reinforcing how to use earplugs. We have our hazard alert card, which in the handouts is an 8.5 by 11, but we also have those available in pocket-sized cards that you can order from us. They're free, and we'll send them out, and they can be distributed in the class or on a job site or on a shop floor if that's where the training is taking place. There's a handout on choosing the right hearing protection, and then there's one to reinforce when to use hearing protection. All of the materials that Gary and I reviewed today, they're all available on CPWR's main website, cpwr.com, and they're free, and you can just download whatever you need. So with that, we've given you a high-level overview of the program, and we're ready to take questions.
All right, thanks, Eileen and Gary. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and type them in the Q&A box now. I do have one that came in earlier about the construction action level or a required recommended sound level, and it says, is it 90 dB and not 85 dB? What is the NIOSH recommendation?
Gary, do you want to take that, or do you want me to? So 85 is the NIOSH recommended exposure level, and 90 is is OSHA's PEL.
Okay. The next question is, did you start the training yet? How is the feedback for the training so far?
So we've just actually posted all of this information on our website, and what we'll be doing over the next 12 months is finding out how it's working. We'll use a group of trainers who use it. We'll be following up with them with surveys to find out what worked, what needs to be improved, and how we can improve it, what's missing that we can add to it. So in one sense, this will be a living program that we'll add to as new information comes available and based on the feedback that we receive. We're also going to put a survey on the website where people download it, so that if you happen to download our materials and you want to provide us with some feedback, you'll be able to do that, and you'll be able to do it anonymously. Okay.
Next question says, thank you for a wonderful presentation. How commonly used is the in-ear dosimeter by the industry? Or dosimeter, I'm not sure how you pronounce it.
So I'm not sure, but I'm hoping Gary's still on the line, or Gary, if you are, your phone may be on mute.
All right, I think I've been taken off of mute now. The in-ear dosimeter is fairly new still. It has not permeated into the industry as commonly as we're hoping, but you know, we anticipate that over time that the results of the testing show its usefulness. So we're encouraged by its continued growth, but it is still in the infancy.
Great. The next question is just, Eileen, can you click back a slide to share the website address again? And then related to that, the next question is, how do you navigate to the resources just mentioned once you go to the site?
Okay, so if you just go to the main page on CPWR.com, you would go down to the Research to Practice Library, and then within that, R2P and the P2R at work, and you click on Preventing Hearing Loss. Or we have a search feature on the site, so you can search for it as well. And then Jessica will be sending out these slides, so you'll have a direct link to this page.
Okay. Have there been any studies on electronic hearing protection?
No. I'm not aware of any, but Eileen, if you want to take this one.
I was just about to say I was going to give you all the difficult questions. So, I'm not aware of any, but that's definitely something that we could look into.
If employees are exposed at a construction site of 90 dB, are you required to put them on a hearing conservation program with annual hearing testing, et cetera?
I know you're looking for me for that one. So the OSHA 90 decibels for construction or for general industry? I guess we'll look at both. I'm looking at. I'll have to get back to that. I believe you do, but I'm not 100% positive if it's the general industry or the construction for hearing protection, for noise.
Okay. And just, I just want to touch on the difference real quick between the OSHA PEL and the NIOSH REL. So there seems to be some confusion in the questions. Those are two different things. The permissible exposure limit, I believe, and then the recommended exposure limit. So the recommended one from NIOSH is 85, correct? And the OSHA PEL is 90. Eileen and Gary, am I correct in that?
Yes.
Okay.
85 is the NIOSH REL, 90 is the OSHA PEL.
All right, next question is, can you comment on the use of hearing protection and ability to hear backup alarms and other warning sounds? What type of hearing protection should be worn in those situations?
I don't know of any particular studies that were done, but I do know that's a concern, as there are so many noises on a construction job that hearing protection can potentially limit what one hears. But I believe that the hearing protection around backup alarms, well, I should say hearing. With the around backup alarms, having hearing protection in shouldn't be affected by wearing the hearing protection.
Okay. Next question, is this information being coordinated with the OSHA Training Institute Ed Centers for inclusion in 10 and 30-hour courses?
We haven't, but there's a requirement for health electives in those courses, and so we were thinking that this training program could potentially fill that need. Gary, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, obviously we'd be sharing. I do know that this noise program has been shared with many OSHA outreach instructors through our organization, and encourage them to use it in their program, as well as our OSHA Ed Center that CPWR uses. So we are trying to promote it through the OSHA Ed Centers.
Okay.
And Jess, hey Jess, I wanted to go back to a question previous about the requirement for audio testing, and just to clarify the difference between the general industry standard and the construction standard, that in the general industry standard there is a requirement for hearing testing above the PEL, and in construction there is not.
Okay. Thank you. And that actually, we have another question about the difference. Does anyone have any idea why the construction industry standard is allowed to be twice as loud as the general industry?
No.
Yeah, no, I don't know. It's a very good question.
Okay. Eileen, quick question. Can you put up the slide again with the phone dosimeter apps? I don't know how many back it was, if it's at all accessible.
So these attendees are testing my technical skills.
Again, and I've gotten a couple questions about the presentation, so just to reiterate, I will be sending out an email. You don't have to do anything to request it. It'll just go out to everyone who attended that will have all of these slides and the links to the resources, as well as the recording of the event today. While you look for that, I'll just go on to another question.
Is this the screen that we're looking at, Jessica?
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe that's right. Yeah. Okay, next question. Do you have any thoughts on how audiometric testing could be incorporated into a construction site's hearing conservation program? Have you had success with unionized workforces that hire from a union hall versus non-union sites with less ability to follow workers over time?
You know, we didn't look at that in putting this program together, so I can't answer that question. It's an interesting question. I don't know, Gary, if you have any experience. If not, we can.
I don't have any specific examples or experience with that, and that would be an interesting topic to address, but I don't have any available information.
Okay. Okay, a question about providing feedback. Are you interested in suggestions for a possible improvement to the training modules, and what would be the best way to do that, to provide that?
So, we are interested. I mentioned that over the next 12 months, we're going to be, as people use the program, we are going to be soliciting feedback, particularly from the trainers that we have relationships with, because it's easy for us to get that information. But we welcome it from other people as well. And there are two methods. You could email your comments to Gary or myself, or if you'd like to do it anonymously, we're going to be putting a survey, a link to an anonymous survey on the website very shortly, and then you could provide feedback that way as well. So if you wanted to do it without us knowing who's providing it, you're welcome to do that, and you can use that mechanism, or you're welcome to call me or Gary.
Okay. Next question, how accurate do you find the smartphone sound level meters, and does OSHA recognize these as an appropriate collection of sound level data?
So I know that NIOSH did some really excellent research on these, and that they found that the iPhones, because they're manufactured in a more consistent manner than all the different brands of Android, that they found very good reliability. And what we can do is on our page with the training program post some of their research, which talks about the reliability. In terms of the question about OSHA, I'm not sure. Gary, do you know the answer to that?
I don't know. I've not seen anything, but I haven't gone looking for that question. But whether or not OSHA would accept a smartphone app as official monitoring, we'll have to look into that one.
Okay. see, going back to hearing conservation programs, if OSHA comes to a job site and observes employees wearing hearing protection due to loud noises at the job site, would they also want to see the employer's hearing conservation program?
I would think I can't answer that for OSHA. That would be a question better answered by the OSHA office.
Okay. Actually, going back to the previous question about OSHA, someone did comment that to meet any legal standard, a calibrated device is required. Smartphone apps are only valid for ballpark measurements.
Okay.
Question about the actual program or obtaining it. Is it possible to request hard copies of the printouts, or is it only available for download and printing?
So it's available for download and printing, but one thing that we can provide are the hazard alert cards. We do have those printed in 8.5, not 8.5 by 11, but in the small pocket size version in English. The Spanish versions are only available in 8.5 by 11 for download, but we could send you the noise hazard alert cards. The rest of the items are available just for download.
Okay. And Eileen, is it clear on the page that how to order the hard copies of the hazard alert cards, or should people email me for now? How would they go about that?
Well, emailing Jessica would work. You would definitely end up getting your cards, or you could, you have Gary's email address or mine. One way or the other, we'll make sure you get them. I don't think now that you've raised it, I don't think we have a mechanism directly on that page for ordering them, although we do have in the instructor manual information on doing it, but not directly on the web page.
I don't know that anyone would have an answer to this question since it's a little bit outside of our construction purview, but we have a question: does the airline industry and military use higher caliber hearing protection since they are around jet engine noise and other loud noises for extended periods of time, or do they use the same PPE training, et cetera, that everyone else has access to?
I can't answer it specifically, but I would have to assume a manufacturer who had a hearing protection that offered a higher NRR rating would put that commercially available, because that would be a marketing advantage over their competitors, but that's a guess.
Okay. Someone else responded that military flight line operations use additional hearing protection not used in general industry or construction, like skull covers. So there's an answer.
Skull cover.
One more question, it looks like. Is demonstration from the NIOSH Hearing Loss Simulator 3.0 included in this program?
No.
I'd have to go back and make sure.
I did not consider it when putting the material together, so that wasn't put in by me.
Okay. Okay, well, I believe. Sorry. Well, we can double check on that and follow up in case it was, but maybe that's something to look into going forward as well. And I think there are some comments, people chiming in about apps and everything like that, but I think that was our last question. Oh, sorry. Can you comment at all on smartphone audiometric testing that is not the same as dosimetry?
I cannot. That's actually, that's a new topic to me, but I'd be interested to learn some more.
Yeah, I don't know, but we can put it down as something that we can follow up on.
Okay. And one more, please comment on the health effects of noise exposure, such as higher blood pressure, which is a concern for older workers. Does the program touch on that at all?
So yeah, we do talk about the effects of hearing loss on blood pressure now, but only to make a worker aware that they are interrelated. We don't go into any depth beyond the awareness level. Eileen, do you have anything to add?
No, that's correct. We did. This is an awareness, really focused on raising people's awareness of potential health risks.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for your great questions. If I missed reading any of them off, please just email them to me, and we will be happy to follow up after the event. And otherwise, you will be hearing from me once the recording and everything is available. The other thing, if anyone needs proof of attendance, please don't comment about that in the Q&A. Please just send me an email directly, and I will be happy to provide proof of attendance for you as well. All right, and thank you, Eileen and Gary, for the presentation.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank you.